up on Primetime News. Korea's defense minister says Seoul has final authority on deployment of foreign troops to the peninsula, easing concerns over Japan's recent passage of security bills. And during her attendance at the United Nations General Assembly, President Park Geun-hye expects in-depth discussions on Korea's reunification. Plus, major financial institutions expect the local economy to grow a little over 2% in 2015, slowing from its over 3% growth last year. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Monday, September 21st. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Our starting point today is Seoul's reaction to Tokyo's controversial change in its military's role.
South Korea must approve any deployment of Japan's self-defense forces on the peninsula, even during wartime.
And that's the way it should be and will be, according to the defense minister of South Korea. Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
South Korea's defense minister Han Min-gu said on Monday that Seoul has the final authority to reject any U.S. request to deploy Japan's self-defense forces on Korean soil during wartime. During a parliamentary inspection at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul, Han stressed that despite the U.S. having wartime operational control in the event of war, South Korea's president has supreme command and must give permission for overseas troops to fight on Korean soil. In a related matter, Japan's new security policy will be front and center of defense talks next month, involving South Korea, the United States, and Japan. A government official in Seoul says the three countries will discuss follow-up measures after Japan lays out the details of the changes to its policy. The date and location of the meeting are yet to be confirmed, but it's expected talks will be held before the annual Korea-U.S. Security Consultative meeting scheduled for mid-October. Seoul plans to reiterate its stance that Japan will not be allowed to dispatch troops to the Korean peninsula in an emergency situation without the Korean government's prior consent. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan are reportedly pushing for a foreign ministers' meeting this month. A diplomatic source said Monday that the two countries are fine-tuning details for the meeting, likely to take place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly session in New York. If the meeting does take place, it will come ahead of the trilateral summit involving South Korea, China, and Japan, expected for October or November in Seoul. Speculation is that the respective foreign ministers will coordinate details for a meeting between South Korean President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Meanwhile, President Park says reunification of the two Koreas and Northeast Asian issues will top her agenda when she heads to the UN headquarters in New York later this week. Our Lee Soo-eun has more.
In a meeting with her senior secretaries, President Park Geun-hye gave an overview of what she'll be talking about at the UN General Assembly next Monday. She plans on highlighting reunification of the two Koreas with hopes that it will lead to better understanding and support from the international community. Ahead of her UN address, President Park will be in New York from September 25th to participate in the UN Sustainable Development Summit. There, she will speak to leaders and raise Korea's presence by showing its commitment to helping global issues. Speaking on matters at home, President Park emphasized that a more positive outlook is needed in order to bring about economic recovery for Korea. She drew attention to Standard & Poor's recent upward revision of the nation's credit rating to AA-, which came despite negative views on the local economy.
이제 지나친 비관과 비판의 늪에서 빠져나와서 경제 체질을 바꾸고 혁신을 이루어서 제2의 도약을 이루어내야 할 것입니다.
Stressing that government-led efforts towards labor market reform attributed to the rating upgrade, the president urged relevant legislation be passed at the National Assembly as soon as possible. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea policies Hwang Ji-hye is scheduled to arrive in Korea on Tuesday ahead of a defense conference between Seoul and Washington. He'll meet with senior officials in Korea to help coordinate defensive strategies against the North's nuclear weapons and missile threats. For more, we turn to Lee Ji-won.
The 8th Korea-U.S. Integrated Defense Dialogue is set to open Wednesday in Seoul. The U.S.'s chief envoy to the six-party nuclear talks, Hwang Kim, is to attend the two-day meeting, which will be led by South Korean defense official Ryu Jae-seung and Shin Jae-yeon from the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Their focus will be on military defense against North Korea's test firing of long-range missiles and a possible fourth nuclear test. Both sides are also expected to establish strategic plans to counter provocations from the North and nuclear disarmament. This includes enacting and developing an operational plan to track and destroy such weapons in case of emergency. According to a recent report by U.S.-based website 38 North, there have not been any visible changes at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site since August. Satellite images taken earlier this month showed no activity there, despite growing speculation of a possible North Korean nuclear test. But it added the west portal area of the facility, which was the site of nuclear tests held in 2009 and 2013, had two new buildings constructed at the entrance, which are likely being used as guard posts to control access to the area. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
It's one of the most highly anticipated meetings of the year. The leaders of the world's two superpowers will sit down in Washington this week. Plenty of issues will be tabled, including how they handle an unpredictable North Korea. Han Daun reports on the possible scenarios when Xi Jinping faces Barack Obama.
As far as state visits go, it doesn't get much bigger than Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to Washington this week. With President Xi and U.S. President Barack Obama set to hold summit talks at the White House on Friday local time, observers are watching how they broach the issues of China's militarization of the South China Sea and its alleged cyber attacks on the U.S. It's this backdrop that led a professor at Princeton University to say the atmosphere at the summit could be the coldest it's been in decades. Despite their differences, Washington and Beijing share some common ground, and that includes North Korea. Political watchers say the two sides are likely to send a clear message to North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. They say a tangible outcome could be reached if the two sides meet halfway. Currently, Washington maintains a hardline policy of deterrence and sanctions against North Korea, while China plays a kind of big brother role, seeking to persuade the regime to abide by its international obligations. Experts add that a joint statement expected shortly after the summit will give the world a clearer view of China's North Korea policy, which has grown more ambiguous since Kim Jong-un came to power. Watchers say the best outcome as far as North Korea issues are concerned would be that Obama and Xi can coax Pyongyang back to the negotiating table and find a breakthrough in the six-party nuclear talks that have been stalled since 2008. Han Daun, Arirang News.
Not long after his exit from the prime ministerial post, Alexis Tsipras returns. His Syriza party secured victory in Greece's snap general election. That's 5 general election victory in 6 years. Tsipras vowed to rid the government of corruption and pledged a new phase of stability. Connie Kim has more.
Greek leftist Alexis Tsipras declared victory in Sunday's snap general election, claiming a clear mandate to recover Greece's stumbling economy. The left-wing Syriza party emerged as a winner, taking 35.5% of the votes, with the conservative New Democracy trailing with 28.1%. Tsipras vowed to root out corruption and pledged efforts to create stability.
It was a difficult battle, and I feel vindicated today because the Greek people gave us a clear mandate to continue fighting inside and outside the country and boost our people's pride.
The general election results give Syriza 145 seats in the 300-member parliament and New Democracy 75 seats. Syriza had formed a coalition with the independent Greeks, with the two parties on course to secure 155 seats, a majority in parliament. Tsipras made no specific comments on the €85 billion bailout agreed to in July, but the left-wing party did pledge to implement the bailout program due for review next month. Tsipras will have to persuade European Union lenders that sufficient steps have been made to ensure the next payment. The snap election came after Tsipras was forced to back down from his post as European leaders refused to write off Greece's debt and roll back austerity measures. Despite the results, the International Monetary Fund says Greece needs a substantial debt relief. Greece's GDP is forecast to shrink 2.3% this year and by 1.3% in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
In a move intended to end internal strife gripping Korea's main opposition party, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy confirmed confidence in the leadership of Moon Jae-in. However, as our Ji Myung-gil reports, it may end up having the opposite effect.
MPAD's chief Moon Jae-in withdrew his plan to put his leadership to a vote on Monday, a move he insisted upon after party lawmakers expressed their dissatisfaction with his leadership style. The MPAD spokesperson Kim Sung-soo read a message on behalf of Moon.
I will be open-minded and accept sincere advice. I will take full responsibility to reform and unite our party and give my utmost effort for victory in the upcoming general elections.
Despite Moon's decision to withdraw a confidence vote to focus on uniting the party, members of the minority faction still oppose the new set of reform plans on the candidate nomination process, adopted last week ahead of next year's general elections. The MPAD is embroiled in an ongoing spat between the mainstream members loyal to the late former President Roh Moo-hyun and led by Moon, and the minority non-mainstream members. Further complicating Moon's efforts to unite internal factions, MPAD defector Chun Jung-bae announced his plans to launch a new political party in January.
The new party will exclude both the extreme right and left to seek harmony on various positions. I will work with anyone who shares the values of reform to reconfigure Korean politics.
Chun said there was no future for the MPAD and that he was open to talking with incumbent politicians who shared reformist values, irrespective of their party affiliations. The announcement is worrying news for mainstream members in the MPAD, as it could lead to more party defections. The MPAD worries that such deepening division could be advantageous for the ruling Saenuri Party during next year's general elections. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Shifting gears now, a new public fund aimed at tackling youth was launched today. Youth unemployment, that is. President Park was the first to contribute with a sizable sum of over $17,000. And she's encouraging the public to follow suit. Kwon Jang-ho has the details.
20 million won, or roughly $17,000, and 20% of her future paychecks. That's the amount President Park Geun-hye is putting into the newly launched Youth Hope Fund. The fund that the president took initiative in will be used to set up a foundation that will work on to boost jobs for the younger generation. The government will give a 15% tax break on donations to the fund, while a 25% break will be given for amounts exceeding roughly $26,000. KEB Hana Bank was first to receive donations on Monday, with 4 other banks to follow suit on Tuesday.
Our focus is more on luring individuals to this fund rather than large companies. The public can also make contributions even without large amounts of capital and without complicated hurdles.
But concerns linger over whether the fund was put together too hastily, as the plan was announced just under a week ago.
There's no point if you use this money without a plan or end up spending it haphazardly. It would be best if the government takes their hands off it as soon as possible and lets it run its own as a social enterprise.
There's also no long-term plan in place. The government has not set up a cap on the fund, simply saying that it will continue to take donations until the youth unemployment crisis is alleviated. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Korea's growth outlook has been trimmed by various financial institutions. They're predicting Korea's GDP to fall to the low 2% range this year for what could be the lowest level in 6 years. Our Kwon So-hwa explains why.
About a 1 percentage point drop in the country's economic growth compared to last year's 3.3% is what many financial institutions are forecasting for Korea's GDP this year. If that holds true, it could be the worst result since the aftermath of the global financial crisis in 2009, when it posted 0.7% growth. The average outlook from 36 global institutions stands at 2.5%. But major financial agencies like Morgan Stanley and Moody's estimate that Korea's GDP growth will only reach 2.3%. Nomura Securities forecasts 2.2% growth and DKB 2.1%. One of the biggest culprits behind Korea's slowing growth is sluggish exports, which have posted negative results for every month this year, mainly due to weak demand from China. But that's not all.
We already saw less than 2.5% growth in the first half of the year, but in the second half there are even more factors of concern, especially due to global uncertainty such as a possible U.S. interest rate hike.
Domestic institutions have also downgraded a longer-term potential growth rate. LG Research Institute estimates Korea's GDP will grow by an average 1.7% between 2020 and 2030.
As the world economy shifts from a manufacturing-based to a more service-orientated one, and with developing countries such as China advancing in terms of technology, it has become much more difficult to improve productivity.
When factoring in Korea's aging population, a downward trend in the workforce population is expected to begin within the next 2 years, which is why experts stress the need for next-generation growth engines to be discovered as soon as possible. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
After its fall from grace in the U.S. market for cheating emission standards, Volkswagen may be facing disciplinary measures in Korea. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced last week that the German automaker had programmed almost 500,000 cars to circumvent U.S. government emissions tests, allowing them to emit pollutants over 40 times the legal limit. These cars have since been recalled, and the company has halted sales of Volkswagen and Audi models equipped with 4-cylinder turbo diesel engines. The Korean government plans to launch investigations into emission levels of the affected models.
Online comics enjoy immense popularity here in Korea, so much so we even have a common name for them: webtoons. Already many were turned to hit TV series and movies. Our Kim Ji-yeon takes a look at one webtoon that's further blurring the lines between the various platforms by making the leap from cyberspace to musical stage.
Chang Sun-ji's dream is to find a job at a conglomerate, while Jin-yeon repeatedly fails the exam to become a public servant. These characters in Unlimited Power reflect the harsh realities of youth unemployment in Korea. However, the story of their struggles is not something new. The characters have been winning the hearts of online viewers for years. Unlimited Power first appeared on a portal site 7 years ago as a webtoon. By 2013, it was so popular that it was made into 15-minute mini dramas, aired through internet casts and mobile services. And this month, the story has come to life as a musical.
Most people watching musicals are from the younger generation, so they are familiar with webtoons. There's a good chance they'll watch the musical if they know the story from the internet.
But the mix of platforms is not a one-way trend. Popular musicals are being made into webtoons as well. Bungwolju, which tells the tale of a Korean main geisha during the Shilla dynasty, will make its webtoon debut next month, some 3 years after it hit musical theaters in Korea. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And now for international headlines, we turn to our Bruce Harrison at the News Center.
Today's focus: the Pope meets Fidel Castro in an historic visit to Cuba. The United States expands its refugee quota, and actor Viola Davis breaks barriers, becoming the first African-American woman to win the Emmys top award.
Well, Bruce, let's start off in Cuba. What's the significance of the meeting between Pope Francis and Fidel Castro?
Daniel, the meeting is another sign of Cuba opening up to the world, especially after its reestablished ties with the United States this summer. The 40-minute conversation between the Pope and the revolutionary leader is also striking, considering Cuba was officially atheist for much of Castro's rule. The country has warmed to religion over the past few decades. Vatican spokesman said the meeting at Castro's home was very relaxed, with the two even exchanging gifts. Francis gave Castro several of his official papal writings, and Castro gave the Pope a copy of Fidel and Religion. The book contains conversations between Castro and a Brazilian priest. Its publishing ended a taboo on speaking about religion in Cuba, which at the time was still an atheist state. Before meeting Castro, the pontiff celebrated Mass in Havana's Revolution Square. There he warned Cubans to beware of the dangers of ideology and the lure of selfishness as their country enters an era of strengthened ties with the U.S. The Pope was part of secret talks that helped lead to the normalization of ties between the United States and Cuba. The U.S. has announced it will take in more refugees and migrants as Europe struggles to deal with the thousands pouring across its borders. Secretary of State John Kerry announced the U.S. aims to take in 85,000 refugees next year, which is up 15,000 from this year. He said the goal is 100,000 in 2017. During a meeting with his German counterpart, Kerry said the numbers are just targets, though, and indicated the U.S. could resettle even more refugees, especially Syrians.
But this step that I am announcing today, I believe, is in keeping with the best tradition of America as a land of second chances and a beacon of hope.
Kerry's comments follow calls from around the world for U.S. President Barack Obama to play a larger role in helping the crisis. European Union countries are still at odds over where the hundreds of thousands of refugees should go, prompting many borders to be closed and violence at some checkpoints. Shows about fire-breathing dragons and marketing executives who cheat on their wives came away with some of the top prizes at this year's Emmy Awards. There was also a major first in diversity among the award winners. American actress Viola Davis became the first African-American woman to win the Emmy for Most Outstanding Actress in a Leading Role. The Oscar-nominated actress stars in ABC's hit How to Get Away with Murder.
I just think that there is so much work that needs to be done in so many areas in the business with actors of color, so many narratives that need to be seen by people.
After 8 nominations, Jon Hamm finally won Outstanding Male Actor for his role as the philandering, often drunk Don Draper in the AM series Mad Men. HBO's Game of Thrones was the night's biggest winner with 12 Emmys, including Best Drama and Best Supporting Actor for Peter Dinklage. And those are today's stories. Have a great night.
This week's kicked off under summer-like conditions and loads of sunshine. The daily highs were hovering 4 to 6 degrees higher than average, reaching the 30-degree mark. In fact, Hamyang in southern Gyeongsang-do province saw a high of 31.4 this afternoon. And tomorrow is shaping up to be another warm day, but lows will start out in the mid-teens, making a huge gap in temperature. So let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off at 17 and will later on rise to 29. And Gwangju will also peak at 29, while Daegu and Busan will be climbing up to 27 and 26. As for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 29 and 26, while Dokdo rises to 23. Now, this warm autumn weather will persist throughout the week, but from day to night, temperatures will shoot up and down for the time being, so be careful not to catch a cold. Also, for tomorrow morning, commuters will need to beware of foggy conditions. Take extra caution out on the roads. That's all for the weather. Good night.
And we've come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us.
We'll be back same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.